everybody, good morning, hello, hi. Welcome back to Storytime. And welcome back to the channel. Oh, I hope the music is not too loud. I don't want it to be too loud. Don't want the music to be too loud. Hi, Jack, good morning. Is the music too loud? I want to make sure it's not too loud. I want it nice and chill. I want it nice and chill for today. Today is a nice and chill day. Today's a nice and chill day. Freya, good morning. Let me know, is the music too loud or is it too low? Is it good? Is it good? How did I sleep? I didn't. I have yet to sleep. I have not yet slept. I am extremely exhausted and I'm probably going to take a very long nap after this stream. But I feel good. I feel great. I didn't sleep, so it was one of those nights when the insomnia took over and I just could not, for the life of me, catch any Z's. But I'm all right. I tried to sleep. I couldn't sleep, but I'm all right. I feel great. I feel a little tired, but you know, I think I'll take a nice nap after the stream. So don't you worry about a thing. How are you doing, Jack? How are you doing today? I hope you're doing well. I hope you're excited for the stream. This is one of my all-time favorite stories. Like if I was trapped on a desert island and I had to take only one book with me, this would be the book. This one and its sequel. How do I feel? Am I tired? I'm exhausted. I am absolutely exhausted. But I'll be alright. I'll be alright because I'm going to take a nice long nap afterwards. I went out yesterday for Halloween. A little update. I went out yesterday for Halloween. I thought I was going to stay in, but I ended up getting called out last minute with some friends. They were like, hey, let's go out and cause some shenanigans. And I was like, yes, shenanigans. We need to do some shenanigans. So I went out, had some drinks with my friends. We wandered around the city a bit. It was raining, so if I end up catching a cold within the next few days, that's probably why. That's why you saw me online at 3 a.m. Yes, I was online at 3 a.m., but I wasn't really chatting with anybody. I was trying to wind down for the night. That failed because I ended up watching a movie with my friends Cal and Regan. I ended up falling asleep halfway through, which was nice because I was like, oh yeah, I'm tired. But then when I went to bed, I was like, nope. Wide awake. And then of course with Booby being Booby, and he likes being a little chaotic little monster, so that I couldn't sleep. I couldn't, and then I couldn't go back to sleep. I couldn't feel tired anymore, so I've been up just reading. I'm finally catching up on the last book of the Court of Thorns and Roses, Freya. So that way you can stop yelling at me so we could talk about it. So that's what I spent my time doing last night. So you can stop yelling at me about reading it. Bleh. But I feel fine otherwise. I feel great. I'm probably not going to feel all that great later, but you know. Like I said, I'll take a nap. I'll promise. I'll take a nap. I'll get some rest. I had a good breakfast. I have some tea with me right here. I feel fine, mostly. You know, I went out last night. It was a fun night. Despite the rain, because it did rain, but it wasn't cold. So, you know, it wasn't too bad. It wasn't too bad. Had some food, had some drinks with friends. It was a nice time. Left me completely broke, but you know, it is the price to pay. It is the price to pay for hanging out with friends. So I had a good time. So now we can get into the story. This is The House of the Scorpion. One of my all-time favorites, written by Nancy Farmer, who has written other amazing books like A Girl Called Disaster, The Ear, the Eye, and the Arm. I've forgotten most of her other titles, but she's made a lot of amazing stories. Oh, and The Loader Opium, which is the sequel to this story that we're going to be reading today. But we're going to start today. We're going to start with this today, okay? So, give me a moment to readjust myself. Make sure the music is, adequate. I hope it's adequate. I just put on one of the random playlists that I have. That I've saved. Oh, excuse me. That I've saved from, just over the last couple of months of streaming. The last couple of weeks, rather, not even months, just a couple of weeks. So yeah, that's gonna do its thing. And yeah, you guys, sit back, relax, and enjoy. The House of the Scorpion. Youth, 0 to 6. Chapter 1, in the beginning. In the beginning, there were 36 of them. Oh, I should let you know, this is like a sci-fi kind of story, so, like a sci-fi coming-of-age kind of story, so just letting you know, that's what you should be expecting. Alright, okay, let's go. In the beginning, there were 36 of them. 36 droplets of life so tiny that Eduardo could see them only under a microscope. He studied them anxiously in the darkened room. Water bubbled through the tubes that snaked around the warm, humid walls. Air was sucked into growth chambers. A dull red light shone on the faces of the workers as they washed their own array of little glass dishes. Each one contained a drop of life. Eduardo moved his dishes, one after another, under the lens of a microscope. The cells were perfect, or so it seemed. Each was furnished with all it needed to grow. So much knowledge was hidden in that tiny world. Even Eduardo, who understood the process very well, was awed. The cell already understood what color hair it was to have, how tall it would become, and even whether it preferred spinach to broccoli. It might even have a hazy desire for music or crossword puzzles. All that was hidden in the droplet. Finally, the round outlines quivered and lines appeared, dividing the cells in two. Eduardo sighed. It's gonna be alright. He watched the samples grow, and he carefully removed them to the incubator. But it wasn't alright. Something about the food, the heat, the light was wrong, and the man didn't know what it was. Hi, I see. Good morning. Good morning, friend. How are you? Something about the food, the heat, the light was wrong, and the man didn't know what it was. Very quickly, over half of them died. There were only 15 now, and Eduardo felt a cold lump in his stomach. If he failed, he would be sent to the farms, and then what would become of Anna and the children and his father, who was so old? It's okay, said Lisa, so close by that Eduardo jumped. She was one of the senior technicians. She had worked for so many years in the dark. Her face was chalk white and her blue veins were visible through her skin. How can it be alright, he said. The cells were frozen over 100 years ago. They can't be as healthy as samples taken yesterday. That long? The man marveled. But some of them should grow, Lisa said sternly. So Eduardo began to worry again. And for a month everything went well. The day came when he implanted tiny embryos in the brood cows. The cows were lined up, patiently waiting. They were fed by tubes, and their bodies were exercised by giant metal arms that grasped their legs and flexed them, as though the cow were walking through an endless field. Now and then an animal moved its jaws in an attempt to chew cud. Did they dream of dandelions? Eduardo wondered. Did they feel a phantom wind blowing tall grass against their legs? Their brains were filled with quiet joy from implants in their skulls. Were they aware of the children growing in their wombs? Perhaps the cows hated what had been done to them, because they certainly rejected the embryos. One after another, the infants, at this point no larger than minnows, died, until there was only one. Eduardo slept badly that night. He cried out in his sleep, and Anna asked what was the matter. He couldn't tell her. He couldn't say that if this last embryo died, he would be stripped of his job. He'd be sent to the farms, and she, Anna, and their children, and his father would be cast out to walk the hot, dusty roads. But that one embryo grew until it was clearly a being with arms and legs and a sweet, dreaming face. Eduardo watched it through scanners. You hold my life in your hands, he told the infant. As though it could hear, the infant flexed its tiny body in the womb until it was turned towards the man. And Eduardo felt an unreasoning stir of affection. When the day came, he retrieved the newborn into his hands as though it were his own child. His eyes blurred as he laid it in a crib and reached for the needle that would blunt his intelligence. Don't fix that one, said Lisa, hastily catching his arms. It's a Mateo alacran. They're always left intact. Have I done you a favor? Thought Eduardo as he watched the baby turn its head towards the bustling nurses in their starched white uniforms. Will you thank me for it later? Chapter 2. the little house in the poppy fields. Matt stood in front of the door and spread his arms to keep Celia from leaving. The small, crowded living room was still blue with early morning light. The sun had not yet lifted above the hills, marking the distant horizon. "What's this?" the woman said. "You're a big boy now, almost 6. You know I have to work." She picked him up to move him out of the way. "Take me with you," begged Matt, grabbing her shirt and wadding it up in his hands. "Stop that," Celia gently pried his fingers from the cloth. "You can't come, mi vida. You must stay hidden in a nest like a good little mouse. There are hawks out there that eat little mice." "I am not a mouse!" Matt yelled. He shrieked at the top of his voice in a way he knew it was irritating. Even keeping Celia home long enough to deliver a tongue lashing was worth it. He couldn't bear being left alone for another day. Celia thrust him away. "Cállate! Shut up! Do you want to make me deaf? You're just a little kid with cornmeal for brains." Matt flopped sullenly into the big easy chair. Celia immediately knelt down and put her arms around him. "Don't cry, mi vida. I love you more than anything in the world. I'll explain things to you when you're older." But she wouldn't. She had made that same promise before. Suddenly the fight went out of Matt. He was too small and weak to fight, whatever drove Celia to abandon him each day. "Will you bring me a present?" he said, wiggling away from her kiss. "Of course, always," cried the woman. So Matt allowed her to go, but he was angry at the same time. It was a funny kind of anger, for he felt like crying too. The house was so lonely without Celia singing, banging pots, or talking about the people he had never seen and would never see. Even when Celia was asleep, and she fell asleep easily after long hours cooking at the big house, the room felt full of her warm presence. When Matt was younger, it hadn't seemed to matter. He'd play with his toys and watch the television. He'd look out the window where the fields of white poppies stretched all the way to the shadowy hills. The whiteness hurt his eyes, so he turned from them with relief to the cool darkness inside. But lately Matt had begun to look at things more carefully. The poppy fields weren't completely deserted. Now and then he saw horses. He knew them from picture books, walking between the rows of white flowers. It was hard to tell who rode them in all that brightness, but it seemed the riders weren't adults, but children like him. And with that discovery grew a desire to see them more closely. Matt had watched children on television. He saw that they were seldom alone. They did things together, like building forts or kicking balls or fighting. Even fighting was interesting when it meant you had other people around. Matt never saw anyone except Celia, and once a month the doctor. The doctor was a sour old man and didn't like Matt at all. Matt sighed. To do anything, he would have to go outdoors, which Celia said again and again was very dangerous. Besides, the doors and windows were locked. Matt settled himself in a small wooden table to look at one of his books. Pedro el Conejo, said the cover. Matt could read, slightly, both English and Spanish. In fact, he and Celia mixed the two languages together, but it didn't matter. They understood each other. Pedro el Conejo was a bad little rabbit who crawled into Señor McGregor's garden to eat up his lettuces. Señor McGregor wanted to put Pedro in a pie, but Pedro, after many adventures, got away. It was a satisfying story. Matt got up and wandered to the kitchen. It contained a small refrigerator and a microwave. The microwave had a sign reading "Peligro," danger, and squares of yellow notepaper saying "No, no, 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 no." To be extra sure, Celia had wrapped the belt around the microwave door and secured it with a padlock. She lived in terror that Matt would find a way to open it while she was at work and cook his little gizzards, as she put it. Matt didn't know what gizzards were, and he didn't want to find out. He edged around the dangerous machine to get to the fridge. That was definitely his territory. Celia filled it with treats every night. She cooked for the big house, so there was always plenty of food. Matt helped himself to sushi, tamales, pakoras, blintzes, whatever people in the big house were eating. And there was always a large carton of milk and bottles of fruit juice. He filled the bowl with food and went to Celia's room. On one side was her large, saggy bed covered with crocheted pillows and stuffed animals. At the head was a huge crucifix and a picture of our Lord Jesus with his heart pierced by 5 swords. Matt found the picture frightening. The crucifix was even worse because it glowed in the dark. Matt kept his back to it, but he still liked Celia's room. He sprawled over the pillows and pretended to feed the stuffed dog, the teddy bear, the rabbit. Conejo, Matt corrected. For a while this was fun, but then a hollow feeling began to grow inside Matt. These weren't real animals. He could talk to them all he liked. They couldn't understand. In some way he couldn't put into words. They weren't even there. Matt turned them all to the wall to punish them for not being real, and went to his own room. It was much smaller, being half filled by his bed. The walls were covered with pictures Celia had torn out of magazines, movie stars, animals, babies. Matt wasn't thrilled by the babies, but Celia found them irresistible. Flowers, new stories. There was one of acrobats standing on one another in a huge pyramid. 64, the caption read, a new record at the lunar colony. Matt had seen these particular words so often, he knew them by heart. Another picture showed a man holding a bullfrog between 2 slices of bread. Ribbit on rye, the caption said. Matt didn't know what a ribbit was, but Celia laughed every time she looked at it. He turned on the television and watched soap operas. People were always yelling at one another on soap operas. It didn't make much sense, and when it did, it wasn't interesting. It's not real, Matt thought with sudden terror. It's like the animals. He could talk and talk and talk, but the people couldn't hear him. Matt was swept with such an intense feeling of desolation, he thought he would die. He hugged himself to keep from screaming. He gasped with sobs. Tears rolled down his cheeks. And then, beyond the noise of a soap opera and his own sobs, Matt heard a voice calling. It was clear and strong, a child's voice, and it was real. Matt ran to the window. Celia always warned him to be careful when he looked out, but he was so excited that he didn't care. At first he only saw the same bleached blindness of the poppies. Then a shadow crossed the opening. Matt recoiled so quickly he fell over and landed on the floor. What is this dump? Someone said from outside. One of the workers' shacks, said another higher voice. I didn't think anyone was allowed to live in the opium fields. Maybe it's a storeroom. Let's try the door. The door handle rattled. Matt squatted on the floor, his heart pounding. Someone put his face... Excuse me. Someone put his face against the window, cupping his hands to see through the gloom. Matt froze. He had wanted company, but this was happening too quickly. He felt like Pedro el Conejo in Señor McGregor's garden. Hey, there's a kid in there! What? Let me see. A second face pressed against the window. She had black hair and olive skin like Celia. Open the window, kid. What's your name? But Matt was so terrified he couldn't squeeze out a single word. Maybe he's an idiot, the girl said matter-of-factly. Hey, are you an idiot? Matt shook his head. The girl laughed. I know who lives here, the boy said suddenly. I recognize the picture on the table. Matt remembered the portrait Celia had given him on his last birthday. It's the fat old cook. What's her name? The boy said. Anyhow, she doesn't stay with the rest of the servants. This must be her hangout. I didn't know she had a kid. Or a husband, the girl remarked. Oh, yeah. That explains a lot. I wonder if father knows. I'll have to ask him. You will not, the girl cried. You'll get her in trouble. Hey, this is my family's ranch, and my father told me that to keep an eye on things. You're only visiting. It doesn't matter. My dada says that servants have a right to privacy. He's a United States Senator, so his opinion is worth more. Your dada changes his opinion more often than he changes his socks, said the boy. But the girl replied to this, Matt couldn't hear. The children were moving away from the house, and he could make out the indignant tone of her voice. He was shivering all over, as though he had just met one of the monsters Celia told him haunted the world outside. The chupacabras, maybe. The chupacabras sucked your blood and left you dry like an old cantaloupe skin. Things were happening too fast. but he had liked the girl. The rest of that day, Matt was swept by both fear and joy. He had been warned by Celia never to show himself at the window. If someone came, he was to hide. But the children had been such a wonderful surprise. He couldn't help running to see them. They were older than him. How much older, Matt couldn't tell. They were definitely not adults, though. And they didn't seem dangerous. Still, Celia would be furious if she found out. Matt decided not to tell her. That night, she brought him a coloring book the children had thrown away in the big house. Only half of it had been used, so Matt spent a pleasant half hour before dinner using the stubby crayons Celia had brought on other occasions. The smell of fried cheese and onions dripped out of the kitchen, and Matt knew she was cooking Atslano food. This was a special treat. Celia was usually so tired when she returned home, she only heated up leftovers. He colored an entire meadow with green. His crayon was almost gone, so he had to hold it carefully to use it all. The green made him feel happy. If only he could look out on such a meadow instead of the blinding white poppies. He was certain grass would feel as soft as a bed and smell like rain. Very nice, Chico, Celia said, looking over his shoulder. The last fragment of crayon fell apart in Matt's fingers. Que lástima. I'll see if I can find more in the big house. Those kids are so rich, they wouldn't even notice if I took the whole darn box, Celia sighed. I'll only take a few, though. The mouse is safest where she doesn't leave footprints on the butter. They had quesadillas and enchiladas for dinner. The food sat heavy in Matt's stomach. Mama, he said without thinking, tell me again about the kids in the big house. Don't call me Mama, snapped Celia. Sorry, said Matt. The word had slipped out. Celia had told him long ago that she wasn't his real mother. The children on TV had mamas, though, and Matt had fallen into the habit of thinking of Celia that way. I love you more than anything in the world, the woman said quickly. Never forget that. But you're only loaned to me, mi vida. Matt had trouble understanding the word loaned. It seemed to mean something you gave away for a little while, which means that whoever loaned him would want him back. Anyhow, the kids in the big house are brats. You better believe it, Celia went on. They're lazy as cats and just as ungrateful. They make big messes and order the maids to clean them up. And they never say thank you. Even if you work for hours making special cakes with sugar roses and violets and green leaves, they can't say thank you to save their miserable little souls. They stuff their selfish mouths and tell you it tastes like mud. Celia looked angry as though the incident had happened recently. There's Stephen and Benito, Matt reminded her. Benito's the oldest. He's a real devil. He's 17, and there isn't a girl in the farms who's safe from him. But never mind that. It's adult stuff and very boring. Anyhow, Benito is like his father, which means he's a dog in human clothing. He's going to college this year, and we'll all be glad to see the last of him. And Stephen? Matt said patiently. He's not so bad. Sometimes I think he might have a soul. He spends time with the Mendoza girls. They're okay, although what they're doing with our crowd will puzzle God himself. What does Stephen look like? It sometimes took a long time to steer Celia to the things Matt wanted to know. In this case, the name of the children who appeared outside the window. He's 13, big for his age, sandy hair, blue eyes. That must have been the boy, thought Matt. Right now, the Mendozas are visiting. Amelia's 13 too, very pretty with black hair and brown eyes. That must be the girl, Matt decided. She at least has good manners. Her sister, Maria, is about your age and plays with Tom. Well, some might call it play. Most of the time she winds up crying her eyes out. Why? Said Matt, who enjoyed hearing about Tom's misdeeds. Tom is Benito times 10. He can melt anyone's heart with those wide, innocent eyes. Everyone falls for it, but not me. He gave Maria a bottle of lemon soda today. It's the last one, he said. It's really cold and I saved it especially for you, he said. Do you know what was in it? No, said Matt, wriggling with anticipation. Pee! Can you believe it? You put the cap back on. Oh, she was crying, the poor little thing. She never learns. Celia suddenly ran out of steam. She yawned broadly and fatigue settled over her right before Matt's eyes. She had been working from dawn to well after dark, and she cooked a fresh meal at home as well. I'm sorry, Chico. When the well's empty, it's empty. Matt rinsed the plates and stacked the dishwasher while Celia took a shower. She came out in her voluminous pink bathrobe and nodded sleepily at the tidy table. You're a good kid, she said. She picked him up and hugged him all the way to his bed. No matter how tired Celia was, and sometimes she almost fell over with exhaustion, she never neglected this ritual. She tucked Matt in and lit the holy candle in front of the statue of the Virgin of Guadalupe. She had brought it with her from all the way from her village in Aztlan. The Virgin's robes were slightly chipped, which Celia disguised with a spray of artificial flowers. The Virgin's feet rested on dusty plaster roses, and her star-spangled robe was stained with wax, but her face gazed up over the candle with the same gentleness it had in Celia's bedroom long ago. I'm in the next room, mi vida, whispered the woman, kissing the top of Matt's head. You get scared, you call me. Soon the house shook with Celia's snores. To Matt, the sound was as normal as the thunder that sometimes echoed over the hills. It in no way kept him from sleep. Stephen and Amelia, he whispered, testing the words in his mouth. He didn't know what he would say to the strange children if they appeared again, but he was determined to try and talk to them. He practiced several sentences. My name is Matt. I live here. Do you want to color pictures? No, he couldn't mention the coloring book or the crayons. They were stolen. Would you like some food? But the food might be stolen too. Do you want to play? Good. Stephen and Amelia could suggest something, and Matt would be off the hook. Do you want to play? Do you want to play? He murmured, as his eyes closed and the gentle face of the Virgin of Guadalupe floated in the candlelight. Let me get some tea. Chapter 3. Property of the Alacran Estate. Celia left in the morning, and Matt spent the entire day waiting for the children. He had given up hope when, just before sunset, he heard voices approaching through the poppy fields. He planted himself in front of the window and waited. There he is! See, Maria, I told you I wasn't lying, cried Amelia. Her hands rested on the shoulder of a much smaller girl. He won't talk to us, but you're about his age. Maybe he won't be afraid of you. Amelia pushed the girl ahead of her and fell back to wait with Stephen. Maria wasn't at all shy about coming up to the window. Hey, boy! She yelled, rapping the glass with her fist. What's your name? Do you want to play? With one blow, she stole Matt's carefully prepared speech. He stared at her, unable to think of another opening. Well, is it yes or no? Maria turned towards the others. Make him unlock the door. That's up to him, said Stephen. Matt wanted to say he didn't have the key, but he was unable to get the words out. At least he isn't hiding today, remarked Amelia. If you can't unlock the door, open the window. Matt tried, knowing it wouldn't work. Celia had nailed the window shut. He threw up his hands. He understands what we say, said Stephen. Hey, boy, if you don't do something quick, we're going away, Maria shouted. Matt thought desperately. He needed something to interest them. He held up his finger as Celia did when she wanted him to wait. He nodded his head to show that he agreed with Maria's demand about wanting to do something. What does that mean? Said Amelia. Beats me. Maybe he's a mute and can't talk, Stephen guessed. Matt raced to his bedroom. He ripped a picture of the man with the bullfrog sandwich from the wall. It made Celia laugh. Maybe it would make these children laugh. He ran back and pressed the newspaper against the window. The three children came close to study it. What's it say? Maria said. Ribbit on rye, ripped Stephen. Do you get it? It's a bullfrog going ribbit, 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 and it's between two slices of bread. That's pretty funny. Amelia giggled, but Maria looked uncertain. People don't eat bullfrogs, she said. I mean, not when they're alive. It's a joke, dum-dum. I'm not a dum-dum. It's mean and nasty to eat bullfrogs. I don't think it's funny at all. Save me from the Egypts, said Stephen, rolling his eyes. I'm not an Egypt either. Oh, lighten up, Maria, Amelia said. You brought me out here to see a boy, and it was miles and miles across the field, and I'm tired and the boy won't talk. I hate you. Matt stared at the scene with consternation. This wasn't the result he wanted. Maria was crying. Amelia looked angry, and Stephen had turned his back on both of them. Matt rapped on the window. When Maria looked up, he waved the picture and then wadded it into a ball. He threw it with all his force across the room. See, he agrees with me, cried Maria through her tears. This is getting weirder by the minute, said Stephen. I know we shouldn't have brought to Egypt. I thought the boy would talk to a kid his own age, his own size, said Amelia. Come, Maria. We have to get back before dark. I'm not going anywhere. The little girl flopped down on the ground. Well, I won't carry you, fatso. Just leave her, said Stephen. He started walking off, and after a moment, Amelia followed him. Matt was appalled. If the big kids went away, Maria would be all alone. It was going to be dark soon, and Celia wouldn't return for hours. Maria would be all alone with nothing but the empty poppy fields and the chupacabras, who came out after dark and sucked your juices and left you dry like an old cantaloupe skin. Suddenly, Matt knew what he had to do. Maria had walked a few steps away from the window before sitting down again. She was shouting insults at the vanished Stephen and Amelia. Matt grabbed the big iron cooking pot Celia used to make menudo and swung it before he could worry much about her reaction. She would be furious, but he was saving Maria's life. He smashed out the glass in the window. It fell in a tinkling, jangly mess on the ground. Maria jumped to her feet. Stephen and Amelia rose up instantly from the poppy field, where they had been hiding. Holy frijoles, said Stephen. All three stood open-mouthed, staring at the empty hole where the window had been. My name is Matt. I live here. Do you want to play? Said Matt, because he couldn't think of another thing to say. He can talk, said Amelia after the first shock had died away. Is this how you usually open a window, kid? Stephen said. Stay back, Maria. There's glass all over. He stepped carefully over to the opening and knocked out the remaining shards with a stick. He then leaned inside to look around. Matt had to hold on to himself to keep from bolting out to the other room. This is creepy. The window's nailed shut. What are you? Some kind of prisoner? I live here, said Matt. You told us that already. Do you want to play? Maybe he's like a parrot and only knows a few words, suggested Amelia. I want to play, said Maria. Matt looked at her with approval. The girl was struggling in Amelia's arms, obviously trying to get to him. Stephen shook his head and moved away. He looked like he was really going to leave this time. Matt came to a decision. It was frightening, but he never had an opportunity like this before. He might never have it again. He shoved the chair to the opening, scrambled up, and jumped. No! Shouted Stephen, running forward to catch him. It was too late. A terrible pain lanced through Matt's feet. He fell forward on his hands and knees and landed on shards of glass. He wasn't wearing shoes. Oh man. What are we going to do? Stephen pulled Matt up and swung him onto a clear patch of ground. Matt stared with amazement at the blood dripping from his feet and hands. His knees sprouted rivulets of red. Pull out the glass, cried Amelia in a high, scared voice. Maria, stay away. I want to see, yelled the little girl. Matt heard a slap and Maria's shriek of outrage. His head was swimming. He wanted to throw up but before he could, everything went black. He woke to the sensation of being carried. He was sick to his stomach, but worse than that, his body was trembling in a frightening way. He screamed as loud as he could. Great! Panted Stephen, who supported Matt's shoulders. Amelia had his legs. Her shirt and pants were soaked with blood. His blood. Matt screamed again. Be quiet, Stephen shouted. We're running as fast as we can. The poppies, now blue in the long shadows of the hills, stretched away in all directions. Stephen and Amelia were jogging along a dirt path. Matt's breath caught with sobs. He could hardly get air. Stop! Cried Amelia. We have to let Maria catch up. The two children squatted down and let Matt's weight rest on the ground. Presently, Matt heard a patter of small feet. I want to rest too, demanded Maria. It's miles and miles. I'm going to tell Dada you slapped me. Be my guest, said Amelia. Everyone be quiet, Stephen ordered. You stopped bleeding, kid, so I guess you're not in too much danger. What's your name again? Matt, Maria answered for him. We aren't far from the house, Matt, and you're in luck. The doctor's spending the night. Do you hurt a lot? I don't know, said Matt. Yes, you do. You screamed, said Maria. I don't know what a lot is, Matt explained. I haven't hurt like this before. Well, you've lost blood, but not too much, Stephen added as Matt began to tremble again. It sure looks like a lot, said Maria. Shut up, Egypt. The older children rose, carrying Matt between them. Maria followed, complaining loudly about the distance and it being cold in Egypt. A kind of heavy sleepiness fell over Matt as he swayed along. The pain had died down, and Stephen said he hadn't lost too much blood. He was too dazed to worry about what Celia would say when she saw the broken window. They reached the edge of the poppy fields as the last streak of sunlight slid behind the hills. The dirt path gave way to a wide lawn. It was a shimmery green, growing deeper within the blue light of the evening. Matt had never seen so much green in his life. It's a meadow, he thought drowsily, and it smells like rain. They started up a flight of wide marble steps that shone softly in the darkening air. On the other side were orange trees, and all at once lamps went on among the leaves. Lights outlined the white walls of a vast house above, with pillars and statues and doorways going who knew where. In the center of an arch, there was a carved outline of a scorpion. Oh! Came a flurry of women's voices, and they swept down the stairs to lift Matt from Stephen and Amelia's arms. Who is he? Asked the maids. They were wearing black dresses with white aprons and starched white caps. One of them, a severe-looking female with deep creases down either side of her mouth, carried Matt as the others went ahead to open the doors. I found him in the poppy fields, replied Stephen. That's Celia's place, said a maid. She's too stuck up to live with the rest of us. If she's hiding a child, I'm not surprised. Who's your father, kid? Said the woman who was carrying Matt. Her apron smelled like sunlight, the way Celia's did when it came straight from the clothesline. Matt stared at a pin fastened to the woman's collar, a silver scorpion with its tail curved up. Beneath the scorpion was a name tag that said Rosa. Matt didn't feel well enough to talk, and what did it matter who his father was anyhow? He didn't know the answer either. He doesn't talk much, said Amelia. Where's the doctor? Said Stephen. We have to wait. He's treating your grandfather. At least we can clean up the kid, said Rosa. The maids opened the door to reveal the most beautiful room Matt had ever seen. It had carved wooden beams on the ceiling and wallpaper decorated with hundreds of birds. To Matt's reeling eyes, they seemed to be moving. He saw a couch upholstered with flowers that shaded from lavender to rose like the feathers on a dove's wing. It was this couch that Rosa was carrying him. I'm too dirty, Matt murmured. He had been yelled at before for climbing on Celia's bed with muddy feet. You could say that again, snapped Rosa. The other woman opened up a crisp white sheet and laid it over the wonderful couch before Matt was laid down. He thought he could get into just as much trouble for getting blood on that sheet. Rosa fetched a pair of tweezers and began pulling out fragments of glass from his hands and feet. Aye, she murmured as she dropped the bits into a cup. You're brave not to cry. But Matt didn't feel brave at all. He didn't feel anything. His body seemed far away, and he watched Rosa as though she were an image on a TV screen. You should have screamed earlier, observed Maria. She was dancing around trying to see everything that happened. Oh, don't act so superior. You yell your head off if you get an itty-bitty splinter in your finger, Amelia said. Do not. Do so. I hate you. Ask me if I care, said Amelia. Both she and Stephen watched in fascination as blood began to well out of Matt's cuts again. I'm going to be a doctor when I grow up, announced Amelia. This is a very good experience for me. The other maid had brought a bucket of water and towels, but they didn't attempt to clean Matt up until Rosa gave them permission. Be careful, the right foot is cut badly, said Rosa. The air hummed in Matt's ears. He felt warm water and suddenly the pain returned. It stabbed from his foot all the way to the top of his head. He opened his mouth to scream, but nothing came out. His throat had closed with shock. Oh God, there must be glass left inside, cried Rosa. She grabbed Matt's shoulders and ordered him not to be afraid. She seemed almost angry. The fogginess that had surrounded Matt had vanished. His feet, his hands, his knees throbbed with more pain than he had ever known existence. I told you he was crying earlier, said Maria. Be quiet, said Amelia. Look, there's writing on his foot, the little girl cried. She tried to get close, but Amelia thrust her back. I'm the one who's going to be a doctor. Rats, I can't read it. There's so much blood. She snatched a washcloth and wiped Matt's foot. The pain wasn't as bad this time, but he couldn't help moaning. You're hurting him, you bully, shrieked Maria. Wait, I can just make it out. Property of... This writing is so tiny. Property of the Alacran estate. Property of the Alacran estate. That's us. It doesn't make any sense. What's going on? Came a voice Matt hadn't heard before. A large, fierce-looking man burst into the room. Stephen immediately straightened up. Amelia and even Maria looked alarmed. We found the kid in the poppy fields, Father, said Stephen. He hurt himself. I thought the doctor... You idiot! You need a vet for this little beast, the man roared. How dare you defile this house? He was bleeding, began Stephen. Yes, all over the sheet. We'll have to burn it. Take the creature outside now. Rosa hesitated, obviously bewildered. The man leaned forward and whispered into her ear. A look of horror crossed Rosa's face. She instantly scooped up Matt and ran. Stephen dashed ahead to open the doors. His face had turned white. How dare he talk to me like that, he hissed. He didn't mean it, said Amelia, who was dragging Maria along behind. Oh, yes, he did. He hates me, said Stephen. Rosa hurried down the steps and dumped Matt roughly onto the lawn. Without a word, she returned and fled back into the house. Chapter 4. Maria. Give me a second, let me have a sip of my tea. Matt gazed up. Hundreds of stars. Chapter 4, Maria. Matt gazed up. Hundreds of stars laid in a bright smear across the velvety black sky. It was the Milky Way, which Celia had said had sprouted from the Virgin's breast when she first fed baby Jesus. The grass pressed against Matt's back. It wasn't as soft as he'd imagined, but it smelled fresh, and the coolness of the air was good too. He felt hot and feverish. The terrifying pain had subsided to a dull ache. Matt was glad to be outside again. The sky felt familiar and safe. The same stars hung over the little house in the poppy fields. Celia never took him outside by day, but sometimes at night she and he would sit in the doorway of the little house. She would tell him stories and point out a falling star. That's a prayer being answered by God, she explained. One of the angels was flying down to carry out God's orders. Matt prayed now for Cecilia to come and rescue him. She'd be upset about the window, but he could live with that. No matter how loud she yelled, he knew underneath she still loved him. He watched the sky, but no star fell. Look at him. He's just lying there like an animal, said Amelia from not far away. Matt jumped. He'd forgotten about the children. He is an animal, Stephen said after a pause. They were sitting at the first step leading to the house. Maria was busy picking oranges from the trees and rolling them down the stairs. I don't understand, said Amelia. I've been stupid. I should have known what it was the minute I saw it. No servant would be allowed to keep a child or live away from the others. Benita told me about the situation, so I only thought it was living somewhere else. A zoo, maybe. Wherever those things are kept. What are you talking about? Matt's a clone, said Stephen. Amelia gasped. He can't be. He doesn't... I've seen clones. They're horrible. They drool and mess their pants. They make animal noises. This one's different. Benito told me. Technicians are supposed to destroy the minds at birth. It's the law. But El Patron wanted his to grow up like a real boy. He's so rich, he can break any law he wants. That's disgusting. Clones aren't people, cried Amelia. Of course they aren't. Amelia hugged her knees. It makes me feel goosebumpy. I actually touched it. I got his blood on me. Maria, stop rolling oranges at us. Make me, jeered Maria. In about 1 second, I'm going to roll you down the stairs. The little girl stuck out her tongue. She threw her fruit so hard it shot off the bottom step and landed with a soft plop on the grass. Excuse me. Want me to peel one for you, Matt? She called. Don't, said Amelia. The seriousness in her voice made the little girl pause. Matt's a clone. You mustn't go near it. What's a clone? A bad animal. How bad? Maria said with interest. Before Amelia could answer, the fierce man and the doctor appeared at the top of the stairs. You should have called me at once, the doctor said. It's my job to make sure it stays healthy. I didn't find out until I walked past the living room. There was blood all over the place. I'm afraid I lost my head and ordered Rosa to throw it outside. The fierce man seemed less dangerous now, but Matt still tried to wriggle away. The movement sent a wave of agony through his foot. We'll have to take it somewhere else. I can't operate on the lawn. Oh! Excuse me, let me be naughty. Give me 1 second. There we go. Lemmy was being naughty. He was making noises again. It's been a while since Lemmy made noises, so it's nice to know that Lemmy's still, conscious and around. Alright, we'll have to take it somewhere else. I can't operate on the lawn. There's an empty room in the servants' quarters, said the fierce man. He shouted for Rosa, who pattered down the steps with a furious look on her face. She carted Matt to a different part of the house, a warren of dim hallways and a smell of mold. Stephen, Amelia, and Maria were ordered away to take showers and change their clothes. Matt was disposed to on a hard, bare mattress. The room was long and narrow. In one end was a door, and the other was a window, covered with an iron grillwork. I need more light, the doctor said tersely. The fierce man brought a lamp. Hold it down, the doctor ordered Rosa. Please, master, it's a filthy clone, the woman objected. Get moving if you know what's good for you, the fierce man growled. Rosa threw herself across Matt's body and grasped his ankles. Her weight made it almost impossible to breathe. Stop, stop, the boy wailed. The doctor probed the deepest cut with a pair of tweezers, as Matt struggled and begged and finally broke down entirely when a sliver of glass was extracted. Rosa held onto his ankle so tightly her fingers burned like fire. When at last the wound was cleaned and stitched, Matt was set free. He rolled himself into a ball and looked fearfully at his tormentors to see if they planned anything else. I've given it a tetanus shot, said the doctor, putting away his instruments. There may be permanent damage to the right foot. Can I send it back to the poppy fields? Inquired the fierce man. Too late. The children have seen it. The men and Rosa went out. Matt wondered what would happen next. If he prayed very hard, Celia would surely come for him now. She would hug him and carry him off to bed. Then she would light the holy candle in front of the Virgin of Guadalupe. Except that the Virgin was far away in the little house, and Celia might not even know where he was. Rosa slammed open the door and laid newspaper all over the floor. The doctor says you're housebroken, but I'm not taking chances, she said. Do it in the bucket if you got the brains. She placed the bucket next to the bed and picked up the lamp. Wait, said Matt. Rosa paused. She looked distinctly unfriendly. Can you tell Celia where I am? The maid smiled maliciously. Celia isn't allowed to see you. Doctor's orders. She went out and closed the door. The room was dark except for a faint yellow light filtering through the bars of the window. Matt craned his head up to see where it was coming from. He saw a bulb hanging on a wire from the ceiling. It was as small as the lights Celia used to decorate the Christmas tree, but it shone valiantly and softened what would otherwise have been complete darkness. He could see nothing else except the bed and the bucket. The walls were bare and the ceiling high and shadowy. The narrowness of the room made Matt feel as though he were locked in a box. He had never gone to bed alone. Always, even though it might be very late, he could count on Celia's return. When he woke in the night, her snores in the next room made him feel safe. Here there was nothing, not even the wind over the poppy fields and the murmur of the doves in their nest on the roof. The silence was terrifying. Matt cried steadily. His grief went on and on. When it lessened, he remembered Celia and started crying again. He looked up with tear-blurred eyes at the little yellow light, and it seemed to waver like a flame. It came to him that it was like the holy candle in front of the Virgin. After all, the Virgin could go wherever she liked. She couldn't be locked up like a person. She could fly through the air or even knock down walls like the superheroes Matt saw on TV. Only she wouldn't do that, of course, because she was Jesus' mother. She could be standing outside right now, watching his window. Something let go inside of Matt. He sighed deeply, and soon he was fast asleep. He woke to the sound of someone opening the door. Matt tried to sit up, but the pain made him lie down again. A flashlight shone in his eyes. Good. I was afraid this was the wrong room. A small shape ran over to the bed, unslung a backpack, and began taking out food. Maria, said Matt. Rosa said they didn't give you dinner. She's so mean. I have a dog at home, and if he doesn't get fed, he howls. Do you like mango juice? It's my favorite. Matt suddenly realized he was very thirsty. He drank the whole bottle without stopping. Maria had brought hunks of cheese and pepperoni. I'm going to put them in your mouth one at a time, but you have to promise not to bite me. Matt indignantly said he'd never bit people. Well, you never know. Amelia says that clones are as vicious as werewolves. Did you see that story on the TV about the boy who got hair all over him when the moon was full? Yes, Matt was delighted that he and Maria had something in common. He had locked himself in the bathroom after that movie until Celia came home. You don't grow hair or anything, do you? Asked Maria. Never, swore Matt. Good, said Maria. She popped bits of food into Matt's mouth until he couldn't eat anymore. They talked about movies, and then about stories Celia had told Matt of the dangers that lurked after dark. Matt found that if he lay perfectly still, his wounds didn't hurt too much. Maria bounced around and occasionally hurt him, but he was afraid to scold her. She might get angry and leave. Celia hangs charms over the doors to keep out monsters, Matt told Maria. Does that work? Of course. They also keep out dead people who aren't ready to stay in their graves. There aren't any charms here, Maria said nervously. That thought had occurred to Matt too, but he didn't want her to go away. We don't need charms in the big house, he explained. There are too many people and monsters hate crowds. Maria's interest drove Matt to greater and greater heights. He talked feverishly, unable to stop, and he ground his teeth from sheer nervousness. He never had so much attention in his life. Celia tried to listen to him, but she was usually too tired. Maria hung on to his words as though her life depended on them. Do you know about the chupacabras? Matt said. What's a chupacabras? Asked Maria. Her voice sounded a little high and breathless. You know, the goat sucker. It sounds nasty. Maria moved closer to him. It is! It got spikes down its backs and claws and orange teeth, and it sucks blood. You're kidding! Celia says it has the face of a man, only the eyes are black inside, like empty holes, said Matt. Ugh. It likes goats best, but it'll eat horses or cows, or a child if it's really hungry. Maria was pressed right up against him now. She put her arms around him, and he gritted his teeth to keep from wincing with pain. He noticed that her hands were icy. Last month, Celia said he got a whole pen of chickens. Matt said. I heard about that. Stephen said illegals stole them. That's what they told everyone to keep from running away out of sheer terror, said Matt, echoing the words Celia had used. But they really found the chickens in the desert without a drop of blood inside. They were blown around like dry cantaloupe skins. Matt was afraid of Stephen and Amelia, but Maria was different. She was his size, and she didn't make him feel bad. What was it Rosa had called him? A filthy clone? Matt had no idea what that was, but he recognized the insult when he heard it. Rosa hated him, and so did the fierce man and the doctor. Even the two older children had changed once they knew what he was. Matt wanted to ask Maria about clones, but he was afraid she might hate him too if he reminded her. Meanwhile, he had discovered a wonderful power in repeating the stories Celia had told him. They held him spellbound, and now they were impressing Maria, so much that she was practically glued to him. The chupacabras isn't the only thing out there, Matt said grandly. La Llorona walks in the night too. Maria murmured something. Her face was pressed against his shirt, so it was hard to tell what she was saying. La Llorona drowned her children because she was angry at her boyfriend. And then she was sorry and drowned herself, said Matt. She went to heaven and St. Peter shouted, You bad woman, you can't come in here without your kids. She ran down the hill, but the devil slammed the door in her face. So now she has to walk around all night, never sitting down, never sleeping. She cries, "Oh, oh, where are my babies?" You can hear her when the wind blows. She comes to the window. "Oh, oh, where are my babies?" She scratches the glass with her long fingernails. "Stop it!" shrieked Maria. "I told you to stop it. Don't you ever listen?" Matt halted. What could possibly be wrong with the story? He was telling it exactly the way Celia had. "There's no such thing as La Llorona. You made her up." "No, I didn't." "Well, if she's real, I don't want to know." Matt reached out and touched Maria's face. "You're crying." "I am not, you Egypt. I just hate nasty stories." Matt was horrified. He never meant to scare Maria that much. "I'm sorry." "You should be," Maria muttered, sniffling. "Nothing can go through the window bars," Matt said, "and there's tons of people in the house." "There's nobody in the halls," said Maria. "If I go outside, the monsters will get me." "Maybe not." "Oh, great, maybe not. When Amelia finds out I'm not in bed, I'll be in real big trouble. She'll tell Dada, and he'll make me do the times tables for hours, and it's all your fault." Matt didn't know what to say. "I'll have to stay here till morning," Maria concluded. "But I'll still get into really big trouble. At least the chupacabras don't eat me. Move over." Matt tried to make room. The bed was very narrow, and it hurt to move even a few inches. His hands and feet throbbed as he clung to the far edge. "You really are a hog," complained Maria. "Got any covers?" "No," said Matt. "Wait a minute." Maria jumped off the bed and gathered up the newspaper Rosa had spread all on the floor. "Oh my gosh, excuse me." "We don't need covers," Matt objected as she began arranging them on the bed. "They make me feel safer." Maria crawled under the papers. "This isn't too bad. I sleep with my dog all the time." "Are you sure you don't bite?" "Of course not," said Matt. "Well, that's all right," she said, snuggling closer to him. Matt's mind churned over the punishment Maria would have to endure because she had brought him food. He didn't know what the times tables were, but they were probably something awful. So much had happened in such a short time, and Matt couldn't understand half of it. Why had he been thrown out onto the lawn when everyone had been so eager to help him at first? Why had the fierce man called him a little beast? And why had Amelia told Maria he was a bad animal? It had something to do with this being a clone, and also, perhaps, with the writing on his foot. Matt had once asked Celia about the words on his foot, and she said it was something that they put on babies to keep them from getting lost. He assumed everyone was tattooed. From Stephen's reaction, it seemed like everyone wasn't. Maria wriggled inside and flung her arms out in her sleep. The newspaper quickly fell to the floor. Matt had to scoot to the extreme edge of the bed in order to keep from being kicked. At one point, she seemed to have a nightmare. She called, "Mama, Mama." Matt tried to wake her, but she punched him. In the first blue light of dawn, Matt forced himself to get up. He gasped with the pain in his feet. It was worse than last night. He dropped to his hands and knees and moved as noiselessly as possible, pulling the bucket along with him. When he got to the end of the bed where he thought Maria couldn't see him, he tried to pee silently. Maria turned over. The noise made Matt jump. The bucket tipped over. He had to fetch a newspaper to stop up the mess, and then he had to rest with his back against the wall because his hands and feet hurt him so much. "Bad girl!" shouted Rosa, flinging open the door. Behind her was a covey of maids, all craning their necks to see what was inside. "We turned the house upside down looking for you," Rosa yelled. "All this time you were hiding out with this filthy clone. Boy, you are in trouble. You're going to be sent at home at once." Maria sat up, blinking at the sudden light from the doorway. Rosa whisked her off the bed and wrinkled her nose at Matt cowering against the wall. "So you aren't housebroken, you little brute," she snarled, kicking aside the sodden newspaper. "I honestly don't know how Celia stood it all those years." Chapter 5. Prison. Let me get a sippy sip of my tea. Delicious. That night, when Rosa brought him dinner, Matt asked when Maria was coming back. "Never," snarled the maid. "She and her sister have been sent home, and I say good riddance. Just because their father's a senator, the Mendoza girls think they can turn their noses up at us. Pah! Senator Mendoza isn't too proud to have his paw out when El Patron hands the money around." Every day the doctors visited. Matt shrank from him, but the man didn't seem to notice. He grasped Matt's foot in a businesslike way, doused it with disinfectants, and checked the stitches. He once gave Matt a shot of antibiotics because the wound looked puffy and the boy was running a fever. The doctor made no effort to start a conversation, and Matt was happy to leave things that way. The man talked to Rosa, however. They seemed to enjoy each other's company. The doctor was tall and bony. His head was fringed with hair like the fluff on a duck's bottom, and he sprayed saliva whenever he talked. Rosa was also tall and very strong, as Matt had found out when he tried to get around her. Her face was set in a permanent scowl, although she occasionally smiled when the doctor told one of his bad jokes. Matt found Rosa's smile even more horrid than her scowl. El Patron hasn't asked about the beast in years, remarked the doctor. Matt understood that the beast was himself. Probably forgotten it existed, murmured Rosa. She was busy scrubbing out the corners of the room. She was on her hands and knees with a bucket of soapy water by her side. I wish I could count on it, the doctor said. Sometimes El Patron definitely seems senile. He won't talk for days and stares out the window. Other times he's as sharp as the old bandito he used to be. He's still a bandit, said Rosa. Don't say that, not even to me. El Patron's rage is something you don't want to see. It seems to Matt that both the maid and his doctor shivered slightly. He wondered why El Patron was so frightening, since the man was said to be old and weak. Excuse me. Matt knew he was El Patron's clone, but he was unclear about the meaning of the word. Perhaps El Patron had loaned him to Celia and would someday want him back. At the thought of Celia, Matt's eyes filled with tears. He swallowed them back. He would not show weakness in front of his tormentors. He knew instinctively they would seize on it to hurt him even more. You're wearing perfume, Rosa, the doctor said slyly. Ha! You think I put on anything to please you, Willem? The maid stood up and wiped her soapy hands on her apron. I think you're wearing it behind your ears. It's the disinfectant I used to clean out the bath, said Rosa. To a doctor, it probably smells good. So it does, my thorny little Rosa. Willem tried to grab her, but she wriggled out of his arms. Stop it, she cried, pushing him away roughly. In spite of her unfriendliness, the doctor seemed to like her. It made Matt uncomfortable. He felt that the two were united against him. When they left the room, Rosa always locked the door. Matt tried the knob each time to see whether she had forgotten, but she never did. He pulled down the window bars. They were as firmly attached as ever. He sat disconsolately on the floor. If only he could see something interesting outside the window. A section of wall blocked off most of what lay beyond. Through a narrow gap, he could see a green lawn with bright pink flowers, but only enough to make him want more. A thin ribbon of sky let in daylight and at night showed a few stars. Matt listened in vain for voices. Scar tissue had formed a knot on the bottom of his foot. He inspected the writing frequently, property of the Alacran estate, but the scar had sliced through the teeny lettering. It was more difficult to make out the words. One day, a frightening argument erupted between Rosa and the doctor. El Patron wants me by his side. I'll come back once a month, the man said. It's just an excuse to get away from me, said Rosa. I have to work, you stupid woman. Don't you call me stupid, the woman snarled. I know a lying coyote when I see one. I don't have a choice, Willem said stiffly. Then why not take me with you? I could be a housekeeper. El Patron doesn't need one. Oh, sure, how convenient. Let me tell you, it's horrible working here, she stormed. The other servants laugh at me. She has to take care of the beast, they say. She's no better than a beast herself. They treat me like scum. You're exaggerating. No, I'm not, she cried. Please take me with you, Willem. Please. I love you. I'll do anything for you. The doctor pried her arms away. You're hysterical. I'll leave you some pills and see you in a month. As soon as the door closed, Rosa hurled the bucket against the wall and cursed the doctor by all his ancestors. Her face turned chalky with rage, except for 2 splotches of red on her cheeks. Matt had never seen anyone so furious, and he found it terrifying. You're responsible for this, Rosa shrieked. She pulled Matt up by his hair. Ow! Ow! Yelled Matt. Bleeding won't save you now, you good-for-nothing animal. No one can hear you. This whole wing of the house is empty because you're in it. They don't even put pigs down here. Rosa thrust her face close to his. Her cheekbones stood out beneath her top skin. Her eyes were wide and Matt could see white all around the edges. She looked like a demon in one of the comics books Celia got from church. One of the comic books that Celia got from church. Right. I could kill you, Rosa said quietly. I could bury your body under the floor. And I might do it. She let him slump to the floor again. He rubbed his head where she had pulled the hair. Or I might not. You never know until it's too late. But one thing you'd better understand. I'm your master now. And if you make me angry, watch out. She slammed the door as she left. Matt sat paralyzed for a few minutes. His heart pounded and his body was slimy with sweat. What does she mean? What else could she possibly do? After a while, he stopped trembling and his breathing returned to normal. He tried the door, but not even rage had kept Rosa from locking it. He limped to the window and watched the bright strip of grass and flowers beyond the wall. That night, 2 gardeners, who refused to look at Matt, removed his bed. Rosa watched with a look of bitter satisfaction. She took away the waste bucket Matt had been forced to use since he arrived. You can go in a corner on the newspaper, said Rosa. That's what dogs do. Matt had to lie on the cement floor without any covers and, of course, without a pillow. He slept badly and his body ached like a tooth in the morning. When he had to use the newspaper in the corner, he felt dirty and ashamed. How long could this go on? Rosa merely plunked down the breakfast tray and left. She didn't scold him. At first Matt was relieved, but after a while he began to feel bad. Even angry words were better than silence. At home he would have the stuffed bear and dog and Pedro the Conejo for company. They didn't talk, but he could hug them. Where were they now? Had Celia thrown them out because she knew he wasn't coming back? Matt ate and cried at the same time. The tears ran down his mouth and on the dry toast Rosa had brought. He had toast and oatmeal, scrambled eggs with chorizo sausage, a plastic mug of orange juice, and a strip of cold bacon. At least she wasn't going to starve him. In the evening, Rosa brought him a flavorless stew with cement-colored gravy. Matt was given no utensils and he had to put his face in the bowl like a dog. With the stew came boiled squash, an apple, and a bottle of water. He ate because he was hungry. He hated the food because it reminded him how wonderful Celia's cooking had been. Days passed. Rosa never spoke to him. A shudder seemed to have come down over her face. She neither met Matt's eyes nor responded when he asked her questions. Her silence made him frantic. He talked feverishly when she arrived, but he might have been a stuffed bear for all the notice she took of him. Meanwhile, the smell in the room became appalling. Rosa cleaned the corner every day, but the stench clung to the cement. Matt got used to it. Rosa didn't, and one day she exploded in another fit of rage. Isn't it enough that I have to wait on you? She cried as she cowered next to the window. I'd rather clean out a hen house. At least they're useful. What good are you? Then an idea seemed to occur to her. She halted in mid-rant and looked at Matt in such a calculating way, he felt cold right down to his toes. What was she planning now? Back came the sullen gardeners. They built a low barrier across the door. Matt watched with interest. The barrier was high at his waist. Not tall enough to keep him in, but high enough to slow him down if he tried to escape. Rosa stood in the hallway, watching and criticizing. The gardener said a few words Matt had never heard before, and Rosa turned dark with rage, but she didn't reply. After the barrier was finished, Rosa lifted Matt outside and held him tightly. He looked around eagerly. The hall was gray and empty. Hardly more interesting than the room, but at least it was different. Then something happened that made Matt's mouth fall open with surprise. Gardeners trundled down the hall with wheelbarrows piled up high with sawdust. They dumped them, one after the other, into his room. Back and forth they went until the floor was full of sawdust heaped as high as the barrier in the doorway. Rosa suddenly swung him up by his arms and tossed him inside. He landed with a whomp and sat up coughing. That's where dirty beasts get to live in, she said and slammed the door. Matt was so startled that he didn't know what to think. The whole room was full of this gray-brown powder. It was soft. He could sleep on it like a bed. He waded through the sawdust, trying to figure out why it had suddenly appeared in his world. At least it was something different. Matt tunneled. He heaped the shavings into hills. He threw it into the air and watched it powder down in a plume of dust. He amused himself in this way for a long time, but gradually Matt ran out of things to do with the sawdust. Rosa brought him food at sundown. She spoke not a single word. He ate slowly, watching the tiny yellow light that belonged to the Virgin, and listened for far-off noises from the rest of the house. "What in God's green earth have you done?" cried the doctor when he saw Matt's new environment. "It's deep litter," said Rosa. "Are you crazy?" "What do you care?" "Of course I care, Rosa," the doctor said, trying to take her hand. She threw him off. "And I have to care about the health of his clone. Good God, do you know what would happen if he died?" "You're only worried about what would happen to you. But I don't lose sleep over it, Willem. I grew up on a poultry farm, and deep litter is by far the best way to keep chickens healthy. You let the hens run around it, and their filth settles into the bottom. It saves their feet from getting infected." Willem laughed out loud. "You are a very strange woman, Rosa, but I have to admit the beast is in good condition. You know, I remember it talking when it lived in Celia's house. Now it doesn't say a thing." "It's a sullen, evil-tempered animal," she said. The doctor sighed. "Clones go that way in the end. I did think this one was brighter than most." Matt said nothing, hunched as he was in a corner as far from the pair as he could get. Long days of solitude in Celia's house had taught him how to be quiet, and any attention from Willow or Rosa can result in pain. The days passed with agonizing slowness, followed by nights of misery. Matt could see little from the barred window. The pink flower was withered. The strip of sky was blue by day and black by night. He dreamed of the little house, of Celia, of a meadow so intensely green it made him cry when he woke up. And gradually it came to him that Celia had forgotten him, and that she was never going to rescue him from this prison. The idea was so painful, Matt thrust it from his mind. He refused to think about her, or when he did, he quickly thought of something else to drive her image from his mind. After a while, he forgot what she looked like, except in dreams. But Matt still fought against the dullness that threatened to overwhelm him. He hid catches of food under the sawdust, not to eat later, but to attract bugs. The window wasn't glassed, so all sorts of small creatures could come in through the bars. First he attracted wasps to a chunk of apple. Then he lured a glorious buzzing fly to a piece of spoiled meat. It sat on the meat just as though it had been invited to dinner, and rubbed its hairy paws as it gloated over the meal. Afterwards, Matt discovered a writhing mass of worms living in the meat, and he watched them grow and eventually turn into buzzing flies themselves. He found this extremely interesting. Then, of course, there were the cockroaches. Small brown ones struggled through the sawdust, and big leathery bombers zoomed through the air and made Rosa scream. "You're a monster!" she cried. "It wouldn't surprise me if you ate them." Oh yes, there are all kinds of entertainment in bugs. One magical day, a dove pushed its way through the bars and rummaged through the sawdust. Matt sat perfectly still, entranced by the bird's beauty. When it flew away, it left a single pearl-gray feather behind, which Matt hid from Rosa. He assumed that anything beautiful would be destroyed by her. He sang to himself, inside where Rosa couldn't hear, one of Celia's lullabies. Buenos dias, paloma blanca, hoy te vengo a solar. Good morning, white dove, today I come to greet thee. Celia said it was a song to the Virgin. It occurred to Matt that this dove had come from the Virgin, and that the feather meant she would watch over him here, as she had done in the little house. One day, he heard footsteps outside. He looked up to see a strange new face on the other side of the bars. It was a boy somewhat older than himself, with bristly red hair and freckles. "You're ugly," said the boy. "You look like a pig in a sty." Matt wanted to reply, but the habit of silence had grown too strong. He could only glare at the intruder. In the hazy background... What? Sorry, I lost my page. Matt wanted to reply, but the habit of silence had grown too strong. He could only glare at the intruder. In the hazy background of his mind, he recalled a boy named Tom, who was bad. Do something, said Tom. Root around. Scratch your piggy behind on the wall. I have to have something to tell Maria. Matt flinched. He remembered a cheerful little girl with black hair, who was worried about him and was punished for bringing him food. So she had returned, and she hadn't come to see him? That got you, didn't it? Wait till I tell your girlfriend how cute you are now. You smell like a pile of dung. Matt felt idly beneath the sawdust for something he had been feeding to the bugs. It was an entire orange. At first it had been green, but time had turned it blue and very soft. Worms filled the inside, diverting Matt with their wiggly bodies. He curled his finger on the orange. It held its shape. Barely. I forgot, you're too dumb to talk. You're a stupid clone who wets his pants and barfs all over his feet. Maybe if I spoke in your language, you'd understand. Tom put his face against the bars and grunted. At the same time, Matt flung the orange. His accuracy was excellent because he had spent days aiming fruit at targets. The rotten orange burst all over Tom's face. He jumped back, screaming, "It's moving! It's moving!" Pulp tripped off his chin. Wiggly worms dropped into his collar. "I'll get you for this!" he shrieked and ran away. Matt felt deeply peaceful. The room might have looked like a featureless desert to Rosa, but to him it was a kingdom of hidden delights. Underneath the sawdust, and he knew exactly where, were catches of nut shells, seeds, bones, fruits, and gristle. The gristle was particularly valuable. You could stretch it, bend it, hold it up to the light, and even suck on it if it wasn't too old. The bones were his dolls. He could make them have adventures and talk to them. Matt closed his eyes. He would like to lock up Rosa and the doctor. He would feed them wormy oranges and sour milk. They would beg to let him go, but he wouldn't, not ever. He fished at the dove feather and contemplated its silky colors. The feather usually made him feel safe, but now it made him feel uneasy. Celia said the Virgin loved all kind and gentle things. She wouldn't approve of throwing a rotten orange in Tom's face, even if he deserved it. If she looked inside Matt, she would see the bad thoughts about Rosa and the doctor and be really sad. Matt found that he was sad too. I wouldn't really hurt them, he thought, so the Virgin could see that and smile. But still, he couldn't help feeling the warm sensation of pleasure having zinged Tom. But as Celia had once told him, a smart person doesn't spit into the wind. If you throw a rotten orange in someone's face, you can bet the orange will sooner or later come flying back. In less than an hour, Tom had returned with a pea shooter. Matt was only clad in a pair of shorts, so the peas landed on his bare skin. At first he tried to dodge them, but there was nowhere to run in a narrow little room. Matt had settled into a corner with his head cradled into his arms to protect his face. He instinctively understood that if he refused to react, Tom would lose interest. It still took a long time. The boy outside seemed to have an endless supply of peas, but he eventually called Matt a few bad names and went away. Matt waited a long time to be sure. He could be very patient. He thought of Pedro el Conejo, who explored Senor McGregor's garden and lost all his clothes. Matt too had lost all his clothes except for the shorts. Rosa said he would only ruin them. Finally, he looked up and saw his kingdom was in disarray. Running around, he had destroyed the marks that told Matt what lay below. Sighing, he worked his way to the sawdust. He felt underneath to find his treasures. He combed the surface smooth with his fingers and removed the lines and hollows that told him where everything was. It was very much like Celia moving the furniture out to vacuum the rugs and then moving them back again. When he finished, Matt sat in his corner and waited for Rosa to bring his dinner. But something shocking and unbelievable happened. First. "Mijo! Mi hijo!" cried Celia from the window. My child! I didn't know where you were. Oh God, they told me you were with El Patron. I didn't know." She was holding Maria up to the window in the crook of her arm. "He looks different," observed Maria. "They starved him, the animals, and took his clothes. Come here, darling. I want to touch you." Celia jammed her big hand through the bars. "Let me see you, mi vida. I can't believe what's happened." But Matt could only stare. He wanted to go. He had dreamed of nothing else, but now that the moment had actually come, he couldn't move. It was all too good to be true. If he gave in and ran to Celia, something bad would happen. Sorry. Celia would turn into Rosa, and Maria would turn into Tom. The disappointment would break him into pieces. Hey, Egypt! I went to a lot of trouble to come here, said Maria. Are you too weak to stand? Celia cried suddenly. Oh my God, have they broken your legs? At least say something. They haven't torn out your tongue. She began to wail like La Llorona. She stretched her hands through the bars. Her misery tore at Matt, and he still couldn't move or speak. You're squeezing me, complained Maria, so Celia put her down. The little girl managed to stand tall enough to peer through the window. My dog, Furball, was like that when dog catcher caught him. I cried and cried until Dada brought him back. Furball wouldn't eat or look at me for a whole day, but he got over it. I'm sure Matt will too. Out of the mouths of babies come wisdom, said Celia. I'm not a baby. Of course not, darling. You only reminded me that the most important thing is to get Matt free, Celia said, smoothing Maria's hair. We can worry about the other stuff later. If I give you a letter, can you keep it a secret from everyone, especially Tom? Sure, said Maria. I hate to do it, Celia said, half to herself. I hate like crazy to do it, but there is only one person who can save Matt. Maria, you must take the letter to your Dada. He will know where to send it. Okay, said Maria cheerfully. Hey, Matt, Celia's going to put chilies in Tom's hot chocolate tonight, so only you mustn't tell anyone. And you mustn't either, said Celia. Okay. Don't you worry, the woman called to Matt. I got more trick up my sleeves than an old man coyote has fleas. I'll get you out of there, my love. Matt was frankly relieved to see them go. They were an unwelcome intrusion in the orderly world he had created. He could forget them now and get back to the contemplation of his kingdom. The surface of the sawdust was combed smooth, the treasures hidden beneath marks that only he, the king, understood. A bee wandered in, found nothing, and left. A spider mended its web high up near the ceiling. Matt took out the dove feather and lost himself in its silky perfection. Middle age, 7 to 11. Chapter 6, El Patron. Get up! Get up! Shouted Rosa. Matt had been sleeping in a hollow formed by his body. As he slept, he sank down until the sawdust almost covered him. The sudden awakening made him gasp. The sawdust went up his nose, and he doubled over, coughing and retching. Get up! Oh, you're impossible. I've got to wash you, dress you, and who knows what else. You're nothing but trouble. Rosa yanked him up by the hair and dragged him out of the room. Matt was hurriedly down dingy hallways and past doors that opened into rooms both cramped and gloomy. A maid scrubbed the floor with a big brush. She looked up with hopeless eyes as Rosa rushed him past. Rosa pushed him into a steamy bathroom. A tub stained with rust was already full of water. The woman shook Matt out of his shorts before he knew what was happening, and dumped him inside. It was the first bath he had since being locked up. Matt felt like a thirsty sponge, soaking up all the water until he was so full that he could hardly move. The warmth soothed his skin, which had become itchy and sore. Sit up! I haven't got all day, growled Rosa, setting to work with a brush almost as big as the one in the hallway. She scoured him until he was pink, dried him with a big fluffy towel, and tried to get a comb through his tangled hair. In her fury because it wouldn't come right, she grabbed a pair of scissors and cut it all off. They want tidy, they'll get tidy, she murmured. She stuffed Matt into a long-sleeved shirt and trousers and gave him a pair of rubber sandals to wear. Very soon he was being hurried across the courtyard to another part of the house. His legs ached with the effort of walking. Halfway across the courtyard, his feet tingled in the unfamiliar sandals, and he stumbled against Rosa. She took the opportunity to lecture him. The doctor will be there, she said, and so will important members of the family. They'll want to make sure you're healthy. If they ask questions, don't answer. And above all, don't say anything about me. She brought her face down close to him. You'll be all alone with me in that little room, she whispered. I swear I'll kill you and bury you under the floor if you make trouble. Matt had no trouble believing her. He forced his trembling legs to follow her to a part of the house as different from his old prison as the sun was from the candle. The walls were painted cream and rose and pale green. It was so bright and cheerful, it raised his spirits in spite of Rosa's dire Dire... Oh. Hello? There we go. Dire threats. The floor gleamed with polish that made Matt feel like he was walking on water. Windows looked out in gardens with fountains. They splashed and glittered in the sun. A magnificent bird with a long green tail stepped delicately across a walk. Matt wanted to stop, but Rosa shoved him on, all the while cursing beneath her breath. Finally, they came to a large room with a marvelous carpet woven with birds and vines. Matt wanted to kneel down and touch them. "Stand up!" hissed Rosa. He saw windows framed by blue curtains that went from floor to ceiling. A small table set with a teapot, cups, and a silver plate of cookies set next to a flowered armchair. Matt's mouth watered at the memory of cookies. "Come closer, boy," said an old voice. Rosa gasped. Her hands dropped from Matt's shoulder. "El Patron," she whispered. Matt saw that what he had taken for an empty armchair actually contained a man. He was extremely thin, with shoulder-length white hair neatly combed aside a face so seamed and wrinkled it hardly seemed real. He was wearing a dressing gown, and his knees were covered by a blanket. It was the blanket that had fooled Matt into thinking the old man was part of the chair. "It's all right," Celia said from behind him. Matt whirled to see her in the doorway. His heart lurched with relief. Celia brushed past Rosa and took his hand. "He's had a bad time, mi patron. For 6 months they kept him like a wild animal." "You lie," snarled Rosa. "I've seen it with my own eyes. Maria Mendoza told me." "She's a baby. Who can believe a baby?" "I can," said Celia. She hadn't been to the house for 6 months. When she arrived, she asked to see Matt, and Tom boasted that she shot him dead. She flew straight to me. "Shot him? Is he hurt?" said the old man. "He was already hurt," Celia described the injuries caused by the broken glass. "Why didn't anyone tell me?" demanded El Patron. His voice wasn't loud, but there was a quality to it that made Matt shiver, even though he, for once, wasn't the one in trouble. "It was the doctor's place to do it! It was the doctor's place to do it!" Rosa cried. "It was everyone's place to do it," said the old man in the same cold way. "Take off your shirt, boy." Matt didn't dream of disobeying. He unbuttoned his shirt rapidly and dropped it to the floor. "Dios mío, my God!" "Those bruises must be from Tom's pea shooter," said Celia, sounding ready to cry. "See how thin he is, mi patron. He's got some kind of rash. He wasn't like that in my house, sir." "Call the doctor." Instantly, he must have been waiting outside the door. Willem entered and began examining Matt. He shook his head as though he was genuinely surprised by the boy's condition. "He's suffering from mild malnutrition," said the doctor said. "He has sores in his mouth. His skin condition, I would say, comes from a combination of dirt and an allergic reaction to chicken litter." "Chicken litter?" said the old man. "I understand he was kept in a room full of sawdust to cut down on housekeeping." "You knew about it, Willem!" cried Rosa. "You didn't tell me it was wrong." "I knew nothing about it until today," said the doctor. "You're lying! Tell them, Willem. You thought it was funny. You said the boy was in good condition." "She's suffering from delusions," the doctor told El Patron. "It's a shame such an unstable individual was allowed to have a position of responsibility." Rosa flew at the doctor and raked his face with her nails before he was able to grasp her wrists. She kicked and screamed, driving Willem back with the force of her rage. She actually bared her teeth like a wild animal, and Matt watched with interest to see whether she would manage to sink them into the man's neck. Everything seemed unreal to him. The sudden appearance of Celia, the old man, the furious battle between his two enemies. It was like watching TV. But before Rosa could do any serious harm, a pair of burly men rushed through the door and dragged her away. "Willem! Willem!" she wailed. Her voice grew fainter as she was carried off. Matt heard a door slam, and then he heard nothing. He became aware that Celia was hugging him. He felt her body tremble as she held him close. The doctor mopped his face with a handkerchief. He was bleeding from a dozen scratches. Only El Patron appeared tranquil. He had settled back in his armchair. His pale lips were drawn up in a smile. "Well, that's the most excitement I've had in months," he said. "I apologize, mi patron," said Willem shakily. "This must have been a terrible shock to you. I'll check your blood pressure at once. Oh, stop fussing, El Patron said, waving him off. My life is far too quiet these days. This was most entertaining. He turned his attention to Matt. So, they kept you on a litter like a barnyard fowl. Tell me, boy, did you learn to cackle? Matt smiled. He liked El Patron instinctively. There was something so right about the way the old man looked. His eyes were a good color. Matt didn't know why it was good, only that it was. El Patron's face seemed oddly familiar, and his hands, thin and blue-veined, had a shape that appealed to Matt in some deep way. Come here, boy. Without the slightest hesitation, Matt walked up to the chair and let the old man stroke his face with a paper-dry hand. So young, El Patron murmured. You can speak now, mi vida, said Celia, but Matt wasn't ready to go that far. Mi vida, I like that, the old man said with a chuckle. I like it so much, in fact, that's what I'll call him. Can he talk? I think he's in shock. In my house, he chattered away like a tree full of birds. He can read both English and Spanish. He's very intelligent, mi patron. Of course, he's my clone. Tell me, mi vida, do you like cookies? Matt nodded. Then you shall have them. Celia, put his shirt back on and find him a chair. We have much to talk about. The next hours passed like a dream. Both the doctor and Celia were sent away. The old man and the boy sat across from each other and dined on not only cookies, but on creamed chicken, mashed potatoes, and applesauce as well. A maid had brought them from the kitchen. El Patron said these foods were his favorite, and Matt decided that they were his favorite too. El Patron said they had too much to talk about, but in fact, only he did any talking. He rambled on about his youth in Aztlan. It was called Mexico when he was a boy, he said. He is from a place called Durango. People from Durango are called alacranes, scorpions, because there are so many of them scurrying around. When I made my first million, I took that as my name, Mateo Alacran. It is your name too. Matt smiled, well pleased that he shared something with El Patron. As the old man talked, Matt pictured in his mind the dusty cornfields and purple mountains of Durango. He saw the stream that roared with water 2 months of the year and was dry as a bone the rest of the time. El Patron swam his brothers, but alas, they died of various things before they had a chance to grow up. Izumi Izu, hello, welcome. I am reading a story today. Today is story time. I'm reading The House of the Scorpion by Nancy Farmer. It's quite a lovely story, so I hope you could sit back, relax, and enjoy it for today. But welcome. I'm so happy that you're here. Thank you for being here. I hope you're having a wonderful day. I hope you're having a wonderful and lovely day. I'm going to take a quick sip of my tea and then I'll get back to the story. So I hope you can sit back, relax, and enjoy it. Excuse me. El Patron swam with his brothers, but alas, they died of various things before they had a chance to grow up. El Patron's sisters were carried off by typhoid when they were so small they couldn't even look over the windowsill. No, not even if they stepped on tiptoe. Matt thought of Maria and worried. Those little girls weren't as old as she was when they were carried off by the typhoid. He wondered if that monster resembled the chupacabras. Of all those children, only one lived, Mateo Alacran. He was skinny as a coyote, with not even 2 pesos to rub together, but he was filled with a burning desire to survive. At last the voice fell silent. Matt looked up to see that El Patron had fallen asleep in his chair. Matt was exhausted too. He was so full of food, he had been half asleep for some time. The same man who had taken Rosa now entered, gently lifted El Patron into a wheelchair, and rolled him away. Matt worried about what would happen to him now. Would Rosa come back and throw him into the sawdust? Would she make good on her promise to bury him alive? But it was Celia who triumphantly bore him away. She took him to her new apartment in the big house. Her possessions had been moved from the old place, so Matt wasn't too disappointed about not returning home. The Virgin sat, as she always had, on a table by his bed. She had gained a new wreath of plastic roses about her robe and a white lace tablecloth beneath her from Celia, in gratitude for restoring Matt to safety. All in all, he was pleased with the chance, although he missed the doves cooing on the roofs and listening to the wind blowing through the poppies. "Listen up, Egypt," commanded Maria. "I'm supposed to make you talk." Matt shrugged. He had no interest in talking, and besides, Maria did enough for both of them. "I know you can do it. Celia says you're in shock, but I think you're just lazy." Matt yawned and scratched his armpit. "El Patron is going away today." Now Maria had Matt's interest. He was dismayed that the old man was leaving. He hadn't seen him since the day he was rescued. Celia said the excitement had been too much for someone who was 140 years old. El Patron had to stay in bed until he felt well enough to travel to his other house in the Chiricahua Mountains. "We have to say goodbye to him. Everyone's coming, and you'd better talk or you'll be in big trouble." Maria squeezed Matt's mouth as though she could force the words out. He snapped at her. The little girl scrambled away. "You said you didn't bite!" she screamed. She grabbed a pillow and hit him several times before collapsing on the bed. "Bad clown," said Maria, hugging the pillow to her chest. Matt considered the idea. Being a clone was bad no matter what you did, so why bother being good at all? He reached out and patted her hand. "Oh, why won't you talk?" stormed Maria. "It's been over a week. It took Furball only one day to forgive me after the dog catcher got him." Matt wasn't trying to upset her. He couldn't talk. When he tried to make the words, he was overcome with terror. To speak was to open the door into his carefully built fortress, and anything might rush inside. "Matt was locked up a lot longer than your dog," said Celia as she entered the room. She knelt down and stroked Matt's face. "Furball was gone only 2 days. Matt was trapped for 6 months. It takes time to recover." "Is that how it works?" the little girl asked. "The longer you're sick, the longer it takes to get better?" Celia nodded. She kept stroking Matt's face, his hair, his arms. It was as though she were trying to bring feeling back into his body. "Then I guess," Maria said slowly, "that it's going to take years for El Patron to get well." "Don't talk about that," cried Celia so sharply that Maria hugged the pillow and stared goggle-eyed at the woman. "Don't say anything about El Patron. Shoo, I don't have time to entertain you." Celia flapped her apron at the girl, who fled without another word. Matt felt sorry for Maria. He purposely made his body go stiff to make it hard for Celia to dress him, but Celia didn't get angry. She hugged him and sang him her favorite lullaby. "Buenos dias, Paloma Blanca. Hoy te vengo a saludar." Matt shivered. It was a song to the Virgin, who loved all gentle things and who had watched over him in prison. Then he knew it was wrong to be mean to Celia and let himself go limp again. "That's my good boy," murmured the woman. "You're a good boy and I love you." Matt suffered a moment of panic when she tried to lead him outside. He felt safe in his old bed with the stuffed animals and the tattered copy of Pedro el Conejo. He kept the blinds closed, even though the windows looked out onto a beautiful walled garden. He didn't want anything new in his life, no matter how beautiful. "It's all right. I won't let anyone hurt you," said Celia, lifting him into her arms. Matt had not seen the front of the big house yet. He was enchanted by the marble-walled entryway and the statues of fat babies with stubby wings. In the center was a dark pond covered with water lilies. Matt clutched Celia when he saw a large fish rise casually from the depths to look at him with a round yellow eye. They passed between fluted white pillars to a porch with wide stairs leading down a driveway. Everyone was lined up on the porch, servants to one side and a family on the other. He saw Stephen, Amelia, and Maria standing at attention. When Maria tried to sit down, Amelia yanked her up again. Matt saw Tom holding Maria's hand and felt an almost uncontrollable surge of anger. How dare he be friends with her? How dare she be friends with him? If Matt had another wormy orange, he'd hurl it again, no matter what. El Patron sat in a wheelchair with a blanket over his legs. The burly men Matt had seen before guarded him. Willem stood nearby, dressed in a gray suit too warm for the day. His face was shiny with sweat. Of Rosa there was no sign. "Come here, mi vida," said El Patron. The old man's voice was clearly audible over the sounds of birds and fountains. It had a quality that commanded attention in spite of its weakness. Celia put Matt down. Matt walked to the wheelchair eagerly. He liked everything about El Patron. His voice, the shape of his face, and his eyes, which were the color of the dark pond with a fish lurking in the depths. "Show him to the family, Willem," the old man said. The doctor's hand was damp. Matt felt a revulsion to him, but he allowed himself to be led around the porch. He was introduced to Mr. Alacran, the fierce man who had thrown Matt out on the first night, and who was Benito, Stephen, and Tom's father. Benito, it was explained, was away at college, and Matt would meet him another day. Mr. Alacran looked at Matt with undisguised loathing. Felicia, Mr. Alacran's wife, was a frail woman with long, nervous fingers. She had been a great concert pianist, the doctor said, until illness forced her to retire. Felicia flashed Willem a quick smile that disappeared when she looked at Matt. With her was Mr. Alacran's father, an old man with white hair who seemed unsure of why he was on the porch. Then Matt met again, Stephen, Amelia, Maria, and Tom. Tom gave Matt a scowl, which Matt returned. No one except Maria seemed to be pleased to meet him, but they all pretended to be friendly. It's because they're all afraid of El Patron, Matt realized. He didn't know why, but it was very good that they were. "Has El Gato, the cat, still got your tongue?" inquired the old man when Matt was at last brought back to the wheelchair. Matt nodded. "Celia will have to work on that. Listen, all of you," El Patron said in a slightly louder voice. "This is my clone. He is the most important person in my life. If you thought it was any of you, sorry, misbegotten swine, think again." The old man chuckled softly. "Matt is to be treated with the same respect just as though I were here in his place. He is to be educated, well-fed, and entertained. He is not to be mistreated." El Patron looked directly at Tom, who flushed red. Anyone who harms Matt will be dealt with severely. Do I make myself clear?" "Yes, mi patron," murmured several voices. "And to be absolutely sure, I am leaving one of my bodyguards behind. Which of you louts volunteer for the duty?" The bodyguards shuffled their feet and looked down. "Overcome with shyness, I see," said El Patron. "I pick up this lot in Scotland, breaking heads outside a soccer field. Always choose your bodyguards from another country, Matt. They will find it harder to make alliances and betray you. Well, Matt, make the choice. Which of these shrinking violets do you want for a playmate?" Appalled, Matt looked at the men. Anyone less playful could be hardly imagined. They were thick-necked and brutal, with flattened noses and scars wandering across their arms and faces. They both had curling brown hair that grew low upon their foreheads, ruddy faces, and bright blue eyes. "That one's Daft Donald. He likes to juggle bowling balls. Tomlin is the one with the interesting ears." Matt shifted his gaze from one to the other. Daft Donald was younger and less battered. He seemed a safer person to have around. Tomlin's ears appeared chewed, as they were so misshapen, but when Matt looked at Tomlin's eyes, he was surprised to see a glint of friendliness. Friendliness was so rare in Matt's life, he instantly pointed to the man. "Good decision," whispered El Patron. With the introductions disposed of, energy seemed to desert him. He sat back in his wheelchair, and closed his eyes. "Goodbye, mi vida. Until next time," he murmured. The Alacrans crowded around and assured El Patron of their fond regards. He ignored them. Then Daft Donald lifted him, chair and all, and carried him down the stairs to a waiting limousine. Everyone followed, calling out their good wishes. When the car drove off, the family members hurried away. The servants parted around Matt as though he were a rock in a stream and vanished into the house. He was ignored. Not mistreated, just ignored. Only Maria had to be dragged off, complaining loudly. Celia waited patiently for the crowd to clear. And Tomlin. "Well, laddie, let's see what you're made of," said Tomlin, scooping up Matt in one beefy arm and slinging him over his shoulder. Chapter 7. Teacher. Matt avoided leaving the safe haven of Celia's apartment for as long as possible. But gradually, Celia and Maria had lured him out to the walled garden, and from there to other parts of the big house. Matt didn't like these excursions. The servants drew away from him as though he were something unclean, and Stephen and Amelia turned the other way if they saw him coming. There was always the danger of running into Tom. Tom insisted on playing with Maria. He made her cry, but she always forgave him. He followed her to Celia's apartment in spite of, or perhaps because of, Matt's hostility. He seemed to like being where he wasn't wanted. "It's nice here," said Tom, picking up Matt's treasured teddy bear. "Catch, Maria." He swung the bear viciously by one of his ragged ears and smacked her in the face. The ear tore off. He tossed it to the floor. "Ow!" she squealed. Matt scrambled for the ear, but Tom put his foot on it. Matt flew at him, and soon they were both down on the floor, kicking and punching. Maria ran to get Tamlin. The bodyguard watched impassively for a moment, then reached down and pulled the boys apart. You were told to leave Matt alone, Master Tom," he said. "He hit me first," shouted Tom. "He did," Maria said, "but Tom teased him." "You're a liar," said Tom. "I am not." Matt said nothing. He wanted to throw Tom to the ground. He even wanted to kick Tamlin. He tried to shout insults, but the words weren't coming out. They stayed inside, getting bigger and bigger until he was sick to his stomach. "You're right," Tom said sullenly. "I did tease Matt. I'm really sorry about it." Matt was amazed. Tom seemed to change right before his eyes. The angry red faded from Tom's cheeks. His eyes became clear and godless. It was hard to believe that it was the same boy who had been kicking and screaming only a moment ago. Matt wished desperately that he could get over things that fast. Whenever he was hurt or angry or sad, the feelings stuck their claws into him until they were ready to let go. Sometimes it took hours. Tamlin studied Tom's earnest face for a moment, and then loosened his grip on the boy's shirt. "Fair enough," he said. He turned Matt free too. Matt immediately took both Tom and Maria's hands and dragged them to the door. He felt swollen with all the words he wanted to shout at them. "You want us to go?" cried Maria. "After we made up and all?" Matt nodded. "Well, I think you're a pig, and I'm not going to be mean to Tom just because you don't like him. Besides, everyone thinks you're awful." Maria slammed the door behind him. Matt sat on the floor with tears pouring down his face. He made snuffling noises like a pig, and he hated himself for doing it. But he couldn't stop. Celia would have comforted him if she had been there. Tamlin only shrugged and went back to his sports paper. Later, when Matt had recovered, he searched for the bear's ear, but it was gone. Tom was the master of the near miss. He punched the air next to Matt's head, practicing, he said, karate exercises. He whispered insults too low for anyone to hear. "You're a clone," he murmured. "You know what that is? A kind of puke. You were puked up by a cow." Around important people, Tom was courteous. He asked how they were and listened politely to the answers. He brought drinks to his mother and opened doors for his grandfather. He was thoughtful, and yet there was something a little off about everything Tom did. He brought his mother drinks, but the glass didn't always seem clean. He opened the door for his grandfather, but he let it swing shut on the old man's heel. It wasn't quite enough to make him fall, and it could have been an accident. Everyone trusted Tom because he had such an open, innocent face, and yet "He's an unnatural little weevil," growled Tamlin. Matt was relieved to find the bodyguard didn't like him either. Tamlin. Matt spent the first weeks tiptoeing around him. The man was so large and dangerous looking. It was like having a tame grizzly bear in your house. Tamlin planted himself in Celia's easy chair and watched silently as Maria and Celia tried to tempt Matt to read or do a puzzle or eat. Matt enjoyed these activities, but it pleased him to be coaxed. He could make Maria almost scream with frustration. Celia would only stroke his hair and sigh. The bodyguard seemed to be reading, but his eyes flicked up and back again as he took in the scene before him. Matt thought he looked irritated, although it was hard to tell. Tamlin's normal expression wasn't very pleasant. The doctor visited often because of a cough Matt developed. At first it didn't seem important, but one night he woke with his throat full of liquid. He couldn't get any air. He stumbled to Celia's room and doubled up on the floor. Celia screamed for Tamlin. Bursting through the door, the bodyguard upended Matt and gave him a whack on the back. Matt spat out a mass of thick slime. Tamlin matter-of-factly ran his fingers around the inside of Matt's mouth to clear it out. "Done that with lambs on me dad's farm," he said, handing the boy back to Celia. When Willem came later, Tamlin watched everything the doctor did. The bodyguard said nothing, but his presence made Willem's hands slick with sweat. Matt didn't know why the doctor was so afraid of Tamlin, but it pleased him deeply that it was so. After that, all Matt had to do was cough, and Celia or Maria would fall into a satisfying panic. Sometimes Matt really did have trouble breathing, but sometimes he only wanted to reassure himself that someone cared for him. "I have to go to school, you idiot," said Maria. "The holidays are over." Matt stared out the window, punishing her for abandoning him. "I don't live here, you know. Sometimes maybe they'll let you visit my house. You'd love it. I have a dog and a tortoise and a parakeet. The parakeet talks, but it doesn't mean anything." Matt shifted his position to make his rejection more obvious. If Maria didn't notice she was being snubbed, the whole thing was pointless. "I think you can talk if you want to," she went on. "Everyone says you're too stupid, but I don't believe it. Please, Matt," she wheedled. "Say you'll miss me or hug me. I don't understand that. Verbal howls when I leave home." Matt turned his back on her. "You're so mean. I'd take you to school, but they don't allow clones. Anyhow, the other kids..." Maria's voice trailed off. Matt could guess. The other kids would run away like Stephen and Amelia. "I'll be back on weekends, and you'll have a teacher here." She put her hand out tentatively. Matt shoved it away. "Oh dear," she said with a catch in her voice. She cried too easily, Matt thought. He felt a breeze as the door opened. How could she betray him by going away? She was probably visiting Tom now, asking him to go to school with her because she liked him better, the unnatural little weevil. You could have been nicer," remarked Tomlin. Matt continued staring out the window. What business of it was Tomlin's to worry about Maria? He was Matt's bodyguard, not hers. "Oh, you can understand me," said the man. "I've been watching you with your sharp little eyes. You take in everything everyone says. You're just like the old man. I don't know much about this clone business. I was 12 the last time I darkened the schoolroom door, but I know you're a copy of him. It's like the old vulture was being given a second chance." Matt's eyes opened wide at this Tomlin's choice of words. No one ever criticized El Patron. "I'll tell you this. El Patron has his good side and his bad side. Very dark indeed is His Majesty when he wants to be. When he was young, he made a choice, like a tree does when it decides to grow one way or another. He grew large and green until he shadowed over the whole forest, but most of his branches are twisted." Tomlin settled into Celia's chair. Matt could hear the springs groan with his weight. "I'm probably talking over your head, laddie. What I meant to... Hello! Hello, my little beans. Come here. I can't pet you if you're all the way over... Silly girl. I can't pet you if you're all the way over there. You're too far away. You're too far away, pretty girl." That's my Beans, if you hear the meowing. That's my pet cat, my little Beans. I have 2 cats. For those who are new here, I have 2 cats. One is Beans and one is Booby. Booby always causes the most trouble on my streams. Beans, every once in a while, Beans likes to make noise. Oh, okay, where was I? I'm probably talking over your head, laddie. What I mean to say is this. When you're small, you can choose which way to grow. If you're kind and decent, you'll grow into a kind and decent man. If you're like El Patron, well, just think about it. The bodyguard left the room. Matt heard him outside in the walled garden. Tomlin had energy to spare, and he didn't nearly use it up guarding Celia's apartment. He kept a rack of weights by the wall. Matt heard him grunt as he lifted them. Matt didn't understand much of what Tomlin had said. He never thought about growing up. Matt knew, theoretically, it was going to happen, but he couldn't imagine being bigger than he was now. The idea that if you were mean, you might stay mean forever had never occurred to him. Celia said if you scowled all the time, your face would freeze that way. You'd never be able to smile, and if you looked into a mirror, it would fly into 1,000 pieces. She also said if you swallow a watermelon seed, they'd grow out your ears. Maria was gone, along with Amelia. Soon Stephen and Tom left for boarding school. and Matt found himself the only child in the big house. If he was a child, that is. Tom said clothes weren't the same as children. They weren't even close. Matt looked at the mirror in Celia's bathroom. He couldn't see much difference between himself and Tom, but perhaps he was different inside. The doctor once told Rosa that clones went to pieces as they got older. What did that mean? Did they actually fall apart? Matt hugged himself. His arms and legs might drop off his body. His head would roll around by itself, like in that monster movie he had been watching before Celia ran in and turned off the TV. The idea filled him with terror. "Time for school, laddie," called Tomlin. Still hugging himself, Matt emerged from the bathroom. A strange woman stood in the living room. She was smiling at him, but the smile didn't look right to Matt. It stopped at the edges of her mouth, as though there were a wall from keeping it from getting any farther. "Hi, I'm your new teacher," said the woman. "You can call me teacher." That makes it easy to remember. The laugh was weird, too. Matt edged into the room. Tomlin blocked the door leading to the rest of the house. "Learning is fun," said the teacher. "I bet you're a smart boy. I bet you'll learn all the lessons fast and make your mommy proud of you." She exchanged a startled look with Tomlin. "The lad's an orphan," Tomlin said. Teacher paused as though she didn't quite understand. He doesn't talk," said the bodyguard explained. "That's why I have to answer for him. He can read a bit, though." "Reading is fun," Teacher said in a hearty voice. She took out paper, pencils, crayon, and a coloring book from a canvas bag. Matt spent the morning copying letters and coloring in pictures. Every time he finished a lesson, Teacher cried, "Very good!" and printed a smiley face on his paper. After a while, Matt wanted to leave to the table, but Teacher firmly sat him back down again. "No, no, no," she cooed. "You won't get a gold star if you do that." "He needs a break," growled Tomlin. "So do I," he said under his breath as he ferried Matt to the kitchen for a glass of milk and cookies. He brought Teacher coffee and watched intently while she drank it. He seemed puzzled by the woman as Matt was. The rest of the day was spent counting things, beads, apples, and flowers. Matt was bored because he seemed to be doing the same thing over and over. He already knew how to count, even though he had to do it silently and write down the correct number instead of saying it. Finally, in the late afternoon, Teacher said that Matt had been very good and he was going to make his mommy very proud. Tomlin presented a report of Matt's study over dinner, when Celia returned. "You're my clever boy," she said fondly, giving Matt an extra slice of apple pie. She gave Tomlin an entire pie for himself. "Aye, the lad's that," the bodyguard agreed, his jaws full of food. "But there's something uncommonly strange about the teacher. She says the same thing over and over." "That's how you teach little kids," said Celia. "Perhaps," said Tomlin. "I'm not what you'd call an expert on education." The next day went exactly like the first. If Matt thought he'd been bored before, it was nothing compared to writing the same letters, coloring the same pictures, and counting the same wretched beads and flowers over and over again. But he worked hard to make Celia proud of him. Days 3, 4, and 5 passed exactly the same way. Tomlin went outside and juggled weights. He dug a vegetable bed for Celia in the walled garden. Matt wished he could escape that easily. Who can tell me how many apples I have here?" warbled Teacher on day 6. Wait, excuse me. "Who can tell me how many apples I have here?" warbled Teacher on day 6. "I'll bet it's my good boy." Matt suddenly snapped. "I'm not a good boy," he screamed. "I'm a bad clone, and I hate counting, and I hate you." He grabbed Teacher's carefully arranged apples and hurled them every which way. He threw the crayons on the floor, and when she tried to pick them up, he shoved her as hard as he could. Then he sat on the floor and burst into tears. So someone isn't gonna get a smiley face on his paper," Teacher said with a gasp, leaning against the wall. She started to whimper like a frightened animal. Tomlin thundered through the door and gathered Teacher up in a bear hug. "Don't cry," he said into her hair. "You've done very well. You fixed something the rest of us hadn't a clue how to mend." Gradually, Teacher's breathing slowed and the whimpering stopped. Matt was so startled he stopped crying. He realized something momentous had just happened. I can talk. You get 2 gold stars by your name today, lassie. Thomas said to teacher's hair. You poor sad creature. I didn't know what I was looking at until now. He gently urged the woman out of the apartment, and Matt heard him talking to her all the way down the hall. My name is Matteo Alacran, said Matt, testing his newly regained voice. I'm a good boy. He felt dizzy with happiness. Celia was going to be so proud of him now. He would read and color and count until he became the best student in the whole world, and then the children would like him and they wouldn't run away. Tamlin interrupted Matt's ecstatic thoughts. I hope that wasn't a one-shot deal, he said. I mean, can you really talk? I can, Matt sang. Wonderful. I was going bonkers with the counting beads. The poor thing. It was all she knew how to do. She was an Egypt, announced Matt, using Maria's worst insult. You don't even know what that word means, said Tomlin. Tell you what, laddie. We've got something to celebrate. Let's go on a picnic. A picnic? Echoed Matt, trying to remember the meaning of the word. I'll explain it to you on the way, said Tomlin. And I think that's where I'm going to leave it for today. We have been going on for 2 hours, and I am exhausted. I hadn't slept yet, but, you know, I'm going to go take a nap and try to get some more sleep. That's the curse of insomnia. Insomnia is a curse. So, insomnia is a curse. I'm going to go take a nice long nap. But I hope you guys are enjoying the story so far. I hope you're enjoying it. I know I am, because it's one of my favorite stories. I know I butchered up some of the words. I'm very tired. I'm very tired, so I kind of tongue-tied myself. And I'm very sorry for Tomlin's terrible Scottish accent. I'm not great with voices. But yes, I hope you're enjoying the story. I hope you enjoy the story. I hope you're having a fun time, and I hope I'm doing well enough for you guys, because sometimes I get a little self-conscious. I'm like, am I reading well enough for y'all? I hope I am. I am Wasabi, you're here! I'm just ending the stream now. You came just a little late. The House of the Scorpion doing the rock shows. Oh, that's a good one. I like that. I'm gonna go take a nap because I haven't slept yet. I love you guys so very much. I really do. I hope you all have a wonderful, lovely day. And remember, hug your friends. Tell someone you love them. And be a force for good in the world, because goodness knows the world needs more goodness. I love you all so very, 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 very much. And I'll see you guys on Thursday. Just in time. Don't worry, Wasabi. You can catch up on the VOD when it comes out later, okay? Okay, you got this. You're awesome. You're awesome, friend. I'll see you guys on Thursday for our gameplay of Frambo. Alright, I love you guys. Bye!